The idea of Guru as the supreme divine force is very helpful in the spiritual pursuit. You depend upon his guidance, thinking him to be a superhuman being. So, if you look at the living master, how do you relate to him? As a superhuman being, not as a normal human being. That's when you get ability to relate to the super aspect of his existence. If you relate to Daji like normal human being, you will not get access to the superhuman aspect of his existence. What we relate to is what we absorb. If we relate to him as a normal human being, we can only absorb the normal human qualities. If we relate to him as a superhuman being, we can absorb the superhuman qualities that he has got. If you go with your busy routine of life, dedicating everything to your master, imagine what good it will bring to you in the long run. While doing a thing, think that you are not doing it is doing it for yourself, but for your master, or rather think that your master himself is doing it for himself. While at the breakfast table, you might think that your master is breaking this fast. When you go to the office, think that your master is doing it all this. While returning from the office, suppose you see an attractive dance on the way, your eyes are caught by the charming appearance of the dancers. ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ಯಂಗ್ಸ್ಟರ್ಸ್ಗೆ ಬರೆದಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾಯ್ತಾ ಯಂಗ್ಸ್ಟರ್ಸ್ನ ಮನಸ್ಸನ್ನ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡೇ ಬರೆದಿದ್ದಾರೆ your thought seems to be diverted for a while. Then also think that your master and not you is seeing the dance. You will at once lose curiosity for it because your master's power will begin to flow in you to relieve you of the temptation. When you come back from the office, your children are rejoiced to see you after so many hours. You too enjoy their merriments, and it is but natural. Your attention is for a while diverted towards them, and you feel a bit away from the sacred thought. What you are to do then is to think that what your master is within you is himself enjoying, and you shall be in touch with the same sacred thought again. If you're chatting with your friend, think that your master, not you, is talking to him. While walking, think that your master himself is walking. During meditation, if you entertain the idea that not you, but your own master is meditating on himself, on his own form, it shall bring about excellent results. Similarly, you can adjust yourself in all your routine of work. If you cultivate this feeling and maintain the outlook that your master is doing everything in your place, you shall not only be in constant remembrance all the while, but your action will cause no impressions whatsoever, and very soon you will cease making further samskaras. ಗೊತ್ತಾಯ್ತಾ ಇಷ್ಟು ಕೆಲಸ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಬರೀ ಕಾನ್ಸ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ರಿಮೆಂಬರೆನ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಈ ಮೂರು ಕೆಲಸ ತನಗೆ ತಾನಾಗೆ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಆಲ್ ದ ತ್ರೀ ಥಿಂಗ್ಸ್ ವಿಲ್ ಹ್ಯಾಪನ್ The process, if earnestly followed, will constantly keep the master's form in your vision, and you will feel his presence within and all about. Though, in fact, the real master is not merely his outward physical form, but his inner self. Still, it is almost impossible to ignore the form altogether initially. But initially, the form is there with you all the time. But those who stick to the idea of the physical form alone as the master create for themselves the grossest entanglements and complications. Kabir Das has rightly termed such people as Guru Pashu. This is an examination question. Who is a Guru Pashu? But if the master is a great divine soul who has secured his mergence with absolute reality, meditation on his form is by far the greatest advantage to the disciples. His body, though gross in outward appearance, is really fine and subtle in character as his inner self. If you meditate on the form of such a master, you not only begin to lose your own grossness, but also begin to imbibe within you the finest condition of his inner self. The form taken up in you will, after some time, disappear from sight, and you will gradually embark on the plane of pure reality. I have discussed in my book, The Commentary on the 10 Maxims of Sahaj Marg, how the form disappears from you when you look at it in constantly for some time. Thus, automatically, from the outward form, we travel inwards and then to the real point where everything disappears. So we stop here. Any questions from this? ಆದಿತ್ಯ ಏನೋ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಕೇಳ್ತೀಯ
ಸಾರಿ ಅಮ್ಮ ಅಪ್ಪ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂಗಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಒಂದ್ ನಿಮಿಷ
ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಸೌಂಡ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಏನೋ ಇದು ತೋರಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಹೈಲೈಟ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಏನೋ ನೀನ್ ಕೇಳೋದ್ರಲ್ಲಿ ಇದೆಯಾ ಅಂತ
ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಇತ್ತು. ಇಟ್ ಸೇಸ್ ಡು ನಾಟ್
ಹೇಳಿ.
ಇಟ್ ಸೇಸ್ ಡು ನಾಟ್ ಮೆಡಿಟೇಟ್. ಒಂದು ನಿಮಿಷ. Sorry. Yes. So it says, do not meditate on the physical form of the master, but then it also tells you that you can meditate on the physical form of a master who is of the right caliber. But you and I are not necessarily capable of telling who is a master of great caliber. So isn't a safe thing to do not to do it at all?
That is why we generally don't teach it at all to anybody.
Okay.
When you come to a preceptor, we don't teach that method of meditation on the form of the master.
Okay.
Okay, so that is safe. You are playing safe.
Okay. Excellent.
Okay, so but if you do have a master and if you are able to recognize it, then meditating on the form of the master is of utmost utility.
Nice. But you should have experience of that, not just the expectation of that.
Exactly. You should know for sure by some means. As you say, we might not initially have the means to know about it. But if somehow you come to know that this is the case, then you can actually meditate on the form of the master and derive at most benefit.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. ಬೇರೆ ಯಾರು ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಇದೆಯಾ? ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ಪಾಪ ಲೇಟಾಗಿ ತಗೊಳ್ತಿದ್ದೀನಿ, ಬೈಕೋಬೇಡಿ. ಇವರೇನು 9:30 10 ತಗೊಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂತ. ನಂದು ಮೀಟಿಂಗ್ ಇವಾಗ ಮುಗೀತು, ಬೇರೆ ಮೀಟಿಂಗ್ಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲ. ಸರಿನಾ? ಇನ್ನು ಪ್ರವೀಣ್ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ನಿದ್ದೆ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಂಗೆ ಇದ್ದಾನೆ.
ಇಲ್ಲ ಬ್ರದರ್, ಈಗ ಬಂದೆ ಆಫೀಸಿಂದ.
ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಯು ಲುಕ್ ವೆರಿ ಟಯರ್ಡ್. ಸೊ ಮಧ್ಯಾಹ್ನ ನಿದ್ದೆ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಇದೇ ತರ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ಗ್ರಾಗಿ ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. ಕಂಡೀಷನ್ ಆಫ್ ಗ್ರಾಗಿನೆಸ್. ಗ್ರಾಗಿನೆಸ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ದ ಐಬಾಲ್ಸ್ ವಿಲ್ ಬಿ ಪಾಪಿಂಗ್ ಔಟ್. ಸರಿನಾ? ಆಯ್ತು. I think we have dealt with in the last session also, we spoke quite a lot of things about the constant remembrance, how it works and all. So I think you have a fair idea now. So we shall move to the next part, self-surrender. Okay. We practice bhakti or devotion in order to achieve communion with the Supreme Master. We look upon him with faith and reverence. By degrees, we become so closely intimate to him that every other object loses prominence in our eyes. This is submission to the will of the master, or in other words, the beginning of self-surrender. So please underline that, the beginning of self-surrender. Initially, we look at the master as look upon him with faith and reverence. Then gradually we become more closer to the master. After that, we start submitting to the will of the master. This is the first stage of self-surrender. It goes on developing into faith. As our faith grows stronger, it brings us to a stationary condition, stopping the oscillations of the mind. In due course, we begin to feel ourselves overpowered by some great force which drives our mind away from everything else. We become free of unwanted activities, sticking all the time to the right functioning of the organs or the indriyas. Self-surrender is nothing but a state of complete resignation to the will of the master with total disregard to the self. So please underline that. Those three sentences. What is self-surrender? Self-surrender is nothing but a state of complete resignation to the will of the master with total disregard to the self. A permanent stay in this condition leads to a state of negation. When we surrender ourselves to the great master, we begin to attract a constant flow of his highest divine force from him. In this state, a man thinks or does only that which is in his master's will. He feels nothing in the world to be his belonging, but everything to be a sacred trust from the master, and he is at everything, does everything, thinking it to be his master's bidding. He will become completely subservient to the will of the master. So ಹಿಂದೆ ಕಾನ್ಸ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ರಿಮೆಂಬರೆನ್ಸ್ ಪ್ರಾಕ್ಟೀಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಕಾಲಕ್ರಮೇಣದಲ್ಲಿ ಬೇಗ ಸರೆಂಡರ್ ಸ್ಥಿತಿ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ನಾಟ್ ಓನ್ಲಿ ಬೇಗ ಸರೆಂಡರ್ ಸ್ಥಿತಿ ಎಷ್ಟನೇ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬರುತ್ತೆ? 8ನೇ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬರುತ್ತೆ ಸರೆಂಡರ್. ಸರಿನಾ? ಸೊ ಅಲ್ಲಿ 1ನೇ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನೀವು ಕಾನ್ಸ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ರಿಮೆಂಬರೆನ್ಸ್ ಪ್ರಾಕ್ಟೀಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಶುರು ಮಾಡ್ತು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ 8ನೇ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ ವರೆಗೂ ವೇಗವಾಗಿ ಬೆಳಿಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಅದು ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಸರೆಂಡರ್. ಬಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿಗೆ ನಿಲ್ಲ, ಕಾನ್ಸ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ರಿಮೆಂಬರೆನ್ಸ್ ಇನ್ನೂ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಹೋಯ್ತು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ತನಗೆ ತಾನೇ ಯು ಎಂಟರ್ ಇನ್ ಟು ದ ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ ಆಫ್ ನೆಗೇಷನ್. That is when you enter into the central region. In other words, the entire journey idiyalla, from the first point to the 13th point, it is hastened or quickened by the practice of constant remembrance. The entire journey. ಸರಿನಾ? ಸೊ 8th ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಿಮಗೆ ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಸರೆಂಡರ್ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ ಆಫ್ ನೆಗೇಷನ್ ವಿಲ್ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಆಫ್ಟರ್ ಯು ಎಂಟರ್ ಇನ್ ಟು ದ 13th ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್. ಇನ್ನು ಮುಂದಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಫರ್ದರ್ ನೆಗೇಷನ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಬಟ್ ನೆಗೇಷನ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಏನು? ಏನೋ ಕಳ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದು. ನೆಗೆಟಿವ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಏನೋ ಕಳ್ಕೊಂಡಂಗಲ್ವಾ? ಸೊ ಪಿಂಡ ಪ್ರದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ಬಾಡಿ ಐಡೆಂಟಿಫಿಕೇಶನ್ ಕಳ್ಕೊಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಮೈಂಡ್ ರೀಜನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಮೈಂಡ್ ಐಡೆಂಟಿಫಿಕೇಶನ್ ಕಳ್ಕೊಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಎರಡನ್ನೂ ಕಳ್ಕೊಂಡಾಗ ನಮ್ಮ ಒರಿಜಿನಲ್ ಸ್ಥಿತಿ ಏನಿದೆ ಆ ಸ್ಥಿತಿನಲ್ಲಿ ನೆಲೆ ಆಗ್ತೀವಿ. ಒರಿಜಿನಲ್ ಸ್ಥಿತಿ ಯಾವುದು? ವಿ ಕಾಲ್ ಇಟ್ ಆಸ್ ಎ ಟ್ರೂ ಸೆಲ್ಫ್ ಆರ್ ಎ ಗ್ರಾಸ್ ಐಡೆಂಟಿಟಿ. ಆ ಸ್ಥಿತಿನಲ್ಲಿ ನೆಲೆ ಆಗ್ತೀವಿ. ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ದ ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಸೆಲ್ಫ್ ನೆಗೇಷನ್ ಟು ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ವಿತ್. ಬಟ್ ಅಲ್ಟಿಮೇಟ್ಲಿ ಆ ಟ್ರೂ ಸೆಲ್ಫ್ ಕಾನ್ಶಿಯಸ್ನೆಸ್ ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ, ಅದನ್ನು ಬಿಟ್ಬಿಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಅದು ಬಿಟ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಾಗ ಯು ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಕ್ರಾಸ್ ಬಾಡಿ ಕಾನ್ಶಿಯಸ್ನೆಸ್, ಮೈಂಡ್ ಕಾನ್ಶಿಯಸ್ನೆಸ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಸೋಲ್ ಕಾನ್ಶಿಯಸ್ನೆಸ್. ಮೂರು ಹೊರಟೋದ ಮೇಲೆ ಏನು ಉಳಿಯುತ್ತಲ್ವಾ? ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ದ ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಕಂಪ್ಲೀಟ್ ಸೆಲ್ಫ್ ನೆಗೇಷನ್. Self as the body, self as the mind, self as the soul. All the three have now been overtaken. Then you are said to be in a state of complete self-negation. ಇದು ಯಾವಾಗ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ? ಸೆಂಟರ್ ಹತ್ರ ಹೋದಾಗ, when you establish in the state of thumb, ಆವಾಗ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಸರಿನಾ?
What?
ಹೇಳ್ರಿ.
ಇಲ್ಲ, ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ ಆಫ್ ವಾಟ್ ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಿಲ್ಲ.
State of thumb.
Oh, is in tamas?
No. Thumb is different. Tamassu is different. This is a very common misconception or confusion that people have.
Okay.
Tamassu is ignorance. It is one of the guna.
Okay.
You have three gunas.
Tamas,
Rajasu and Sattva, Satvika. They are part of the three gunas or three qualities or three attributes. But thumb is a state of complete ignorance. The state of complete ignorance comes when we align with the center. Now, tamassu is at the lowest end. The state of thumb is at the highest end. The in-between stages is the stage of knowledge. Tamassu is state of ignorance. Thumb is the state of complete ignorance or supreme ignorance. That is what Babaji calls. Now, entire stretch in between is called as the stretch of knowledge.
Got it.
What we need to remember is knowledge is not our goal. Our goal is reality. That we always need to remember. So we start from ignorance and we cross over the ignorance and develop knowledge. Now at that stage, knowledge is necessary for our journey. Then gradually as we proceed, we don't require the knowledge as much as in the higher stages. Because our dependency on the master grows. Then the need for the self-effort comes down. So what happens is, up to the 13th point, knowledge is useful. After the 13th point, the role of the knowledge gradually comes down. Central region bandaga, I'll explain to you what exactly happens, what is the role of the master, what is our role. I'll explain all these things, then it will be easy for you to grasp.
Thank you.
The beautiful example of surrender is presented to us by Bharata, the son of Dasharatha, when he went to the forest along with the people of Ayodhya to induce his brother Rama to return. In reply to the entreaties of the people, Rama gravely replied that he would be quite willing to return to the capital, provided Bharata asked him to do so. All eyes were turned towards Bharata, who was himself there to induce him to return. But he calmly replied, "It is not for me to command, but only to follow." Bharata thinks Rama is the master and he is the servant. So Bharata is saying, it is not for the servant to command the master. It is for the master to command the servant. So whatever Rama says, I will follow that. I cannot command him to do what he is supposed to do. So that state of being in that servitude was very helpful for Bharata. And that's exactly the kind of state that we develop as we develop closer relationship with master. In other words, our thought will start aligning towards the master's thought. Our will start aligning towards the master's will. our qualities will start aligning towards the master's qualities. Our attributes will start attaining to his master's divine attributes. These are the things that happen in due course of time. The Bhagavad Gita too deals with the state of surrender. It is not an ordinary thing to be achieved easily. It begins after complete negation of all the senses and faculties, for which we proceed by elementary rules of devotion. So the first stage of surrender is the indriyas, the senses and faculties will start quietening down. That's the first stage of surrender. ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಸ್ಟೇಜ್ ಆಫ್ ಸರೆಂಡರ್ ಎಲ್ಲಿ ವ್ಯಕ್ತ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಅಟ್ ವಾಟ್ ಸ್ಟೇಜ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ವೆನ್ ವಿ ಕಮ್ ಟು ದ ಫೋರ್ತ್ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್. ಅಟ್ ದಟ್ ಟೈಮ್ ಯು ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಗೆಟಿಂಗ್ ಎ ಗ್ಲಿಮ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಸರೆಂಡರ್, ಎ ಗ್ಲಿಮ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಹ್ಯೂಮಿಲಿಟಿ. ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ಫೋರ್ತ್ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಸರಿನಾ? ವಿ ಸಬ್ಮಿಟ್ ಟು ಅವರ್ ಮಾಸ್ಟರ್ ಥಿಂಕಿಂಗ್ ಹಿಮ್ ಟು ಬಿ ಎ ಸೂಪರ್ ಹ್ಯೂಮನ್ ಬೀಯಿಂಗ್. ವಿ ಲವ್ ಹಿಮ್ ವಿತ್ ಫೇತ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಎ ರೆವರೆನ್ಸ್, ಟ್ರೈಂಗ್ ಬೈ ಆಲ್ ಅವರ್ ಮೀನ್ಸ್ ಟು ಅಟ್ರಾಕ್ಟ್ ಹಿಸ್ ಅಟೆನ್ಷನ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಫೇವರ್. ಅಟ್ರಾಕ್ಷನ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಕೂಗೋದಲ್ಲ, ದಾಜಿ ದಾಜಿ ಅಂತ. ಆ ಅಟ್ರಾಕ್ಷನ್ ಅಲ್ಲ, ನಾಟ್ ಅಟ್ ದ ಫಿಸಿಕಲ್ ಲೆವೆಲ್. You want him to get attracted at the spiritual level, and that's why you need to be regular in your practice. In practice ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿತ್ತು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ you will start drawing master's attention towards you, and don't think that master is there in the physical body, encapsulated in the physical body. No, a person who is aligned to the reality is there everywhere. In every particle of existence he is there. So don't ever worry about attracting his attention to you. So, and again, don't confuse physical attraction and mental attraction. You need to attract the master at the spiritual level. That is where you are going to derive the maximum benefit. Okay? For this purpose, we connect our link with him in the light of the worldly relationship only for the sake of facility. We think of him as father, brother, mother, friend, whatever. The process, if taken up in the right earnest, is greatly helpful to a disciple. A strong link of attraction thus established leads him to a state of devotion and surrender. Without establishing, by the time we come to the fourth point, we recognize the conditions that we have passed through. Then we start developing faith in the master. Oh, he is a good, a superhuman being who can actually lead us in our spiritual path. If we do not get experience in the first 3 points, our faith in the master at the fourth point will not start developing. Neither the humility develops. So when the faith and the surrender or the seed of surrender does not start developing at the fourth point, there is no question of developing surrender, because the link with the master is not yet very strong. When you have faith in the master, the link becomes strong. Then your ability to utilize that to develop reverence and devotion to the master increases. So without faith, you cannot develop devotion or reverence. The conception of the Guru as a mother, in my opinion, is by far the most appropriate and advantageous to the disciple. ಇದೇ ಡೈಲಾಗು ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಕಡೆ ಬರೀತಾರೆ ಶಾಶ್ಮಾರ್ ಫಿಲಾಸಫಿಲಿ. ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಏನ್ ಬರೆದಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ದ ಕಾನ್ಸೆಪ್ಷನ್ ಆಫ್ ಎ ಗುರು ಆಸ್ ಎ ಬಿಲವೆಡ್ ಈಸ್ ಮೋಸ್ಟ್ ಎಫಿಕೇಶಿಯಸ್ ಅಂತ ಬರೀತಾರೆ. ಸೊ ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಕಡೆ ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ತರ ಬರೆದಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಬಟ್ ವಿಚ್ ಎವರ್ ಯು ಫೀಲ್ ದಟ್ ಯು ವಾಂಟ್ ಟು ಕನೆಕ್ಟ್ ಟು, ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಯುಟಿಲೈಸ್ ದಟ್. A mother is a very embodiment of love and affection, and only a mother's heart can forbear with patience all the troubles and miseries caused to her son, thinking all the while of trying to provide for her son's comforts and happiness. Now, you can also put in as daughter also. ಬರೀ ಸನ್ ಮಾತ್ರ ಯಾಕೆ ಟ್ರಬಲ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ, ಡಾಟರು ಟ್ರಬಲ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ.
ಹೊಸ ಬುಕ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಚೈಲ್ಡ್ ಅಂತ ಬರೆದಿದ್ದಾರೆ.
ಎಕ್ಸಾಕ್ಟ್ಲಿ. ಸೊ ದೇ and that's a good thing. That's why they have tried to make it more acceptable to everyone. ಆಯ್ತಾ? ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಸಣ್ಣ ಅಂತ ಹಾಕಿದ್ರೆ ಬರೀ ಗಂಡು ಮಕ್ಕಳಿಗೆ ಗಲಾಟೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಅಂತ ಆಯ್ತು. The same is the position of your master or guru, who is the spiritual mother of the disciple. A real master is the spiritual mother of the disciple. As such, the guru is always on the lookout for the spiritual welfare of the child, the disciple. It is due to the affectionate attachment of the guru with his disciple that the attention of the great father, who is the great father, the absolute. The guru is the spiritual mother, the absolute is the great father. We are the disciple or the son, with whom his spiritual mother is closely associated or connected, is directed towards him, the son. So the guru, who is the spiritual mother, helps us get the attention of the great father. And the great father is nothing but the absolute. Aita? A mother's affection is well known, but people know very little of the guru's affection and still less of the God's affection. The function of the mother and the true guru is closely similar. The mother retains a child within her womb for a certain duration. The guru too retains the spiritual child within his mental sphere for a certain duration. During this period, the disciple, like the baby of the womb, in the womb, sucks his energy and gets nourishment from the spiritual waves of the guru's thoughts. ಗೊತ್ತಾಯ್ತಾ? Spiritual waves ಬರುತ್ತೆ, guru's thoughts ಇಂದ ನಮಗೆ spiritual waves ಬರುತ್ತೆ. That nourishes our spiritual journey. Like the baby gets nourishment from the mother's womb, we get nourishment from the waves of thoughts by dwelling in the spiritual mind of the guru. When the time arrives, he is born in the brighter world and then his spiritual life begins. ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ ಈ ಡೈಲಾಗ್, ಈ ಸ್ಪಿರಿಚುವಲ್ ಲೈಫ್ ಬಿಗಿನ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ಅದು ಸುಮಾರು ಕಡೆ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ತುಂಬಾ ಅದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ತಲೆ ಕೆಡಿಸ್ಕೋಬಹುದು. ಎಲ್ಲ ಕಡೆನೂ ಆ ಡೈಲಾಗ್ ಹೊಡಿತಾರೆ. ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂಚೂರು ಜರ್ನಿ ಶುರು ಆಯ್ತು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಸ್ಪಿರಿಚುವಲ್ ಲೈಫ್ ಶುರು ಆಯ್ತು ಅಂತಾರೆ. 6ನೇ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ ಬಂದ್ರೆ ಸ್ಪಿರಿಚುವಲ್ ಲೈಫ್ ಶುರು ಆಯ್ತು ಅಂತಾರೆ. 8ನೇ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ ಬಂದ್ರೆ ಸ್ಪಿರಿಚುವಲ್ ಲೈಫ್ ಶುರು ಆಯ್ತು ಅಂತಾರೆ. 9ಕ್ಕೆ ಬಂದ್ರೆ ಸ್ಪಿರಿಚುವಲ್ ಲೈಫ್ ಆಯ್ತು ಅಂತಾರೆ. 12ಕ್ಕೆ ಬಂದ್ರು ಸ್ಪಿರಿಚುವಲ್ ಲೈಫ್ ಆಯ್ತು ಅಂತಾರೆ. 13ಕ್ಕೆ ಬಂದ್ರು ಆಯ್ತು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. ಕಡೆವರೆಗೂ ಹೇಳ್ತಾನೆ ಇರ್ತಾರೆ. ಸೊ ಡೋಂಟ್ ವರಿ ಅಬೌಟ್ ವೆನ್ ಡಸ್ ದಿ ಸ್ಪಿರಿಚುವಲ್ ಲೈಫ್ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್. ಸರಿ,
It feels like a child is told 10th ಮುಗ್ಸಪ್ಪ, 12th ಮುಗ್ಸಪ್ಪ,
ಎಕ್ಸಾಕ್ಟ್ಲಿ. ನೀವು 10th ಮುಗಿಸ್ಬಿಟ್ಟೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನೋಡಪ್ಪ ಏನೋ ಸಾಧನೆ ಮಾಡ್ದಂಗೆ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಆಮೇಲೆ 12th ಮುಗಿಸಿದ್ರೆ ಏನೋ ಸಾಧನೆ ಮಾಡ್ದಂಗೆ ಅಂತೀವಿ. ಅದು ಯಾವ್ದು ಮುಗಿಯೋದೇ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಎಕ್ಸಾಕ್ಟ್ಲಿ ಲೈಕ್ ದಟ್. If the disciple enters the mental sphere of the guru, surrendering all his belongings to him, it takes only 7 months to deliver him into the brighter world. But the process is generally delayed for a considerable time because while in the guru's mental sphere, the disciple remains conscious of his own thoughts and feelings. Thus, we find that the position of the guru is much as the same of the mother. The conception of the guru as a spiritual mother promotes within us the feeling of love, reverence, and surrender, which are the main factors of the spiritual life. Sages have classified disciples. Now, this is again one of the examination questions. The same thing is repeated in Sashmark philosophy also. So when you read Sashmark philosophy, we can actually read it very fast because the same thing gets repeated there. Many things which are there in other books gets repeated in Sashmark philosophy, the last book in this book. The sages have classified disciples under 2 main headings, the Manumata and Gurumata. Manumata, not Manmata, Manumata. Now get good. Manmata alla. ಮನ್ಮತ. ಮನ್ಮತ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಬೇರೆ, ಗೊತ್ತಲ್ವ? ಮನ್ಮತ ಮನ್ಮಥನ್ ತರ ಇದೆಯಾ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಏನ್ ತುಂಬಾ ಸುಂದರ ಮನ್ಮಥ ಅಂತ ಪದ ಕೇಳಿಲ್ವ ನೀನು? ಯು ಡೋಂಟ್ ನೋ ದ ವರ್ಡ್ ಮನ್ಮಥನ? ಓ, ಮನ್ಮಥ ಈಸ್ ಎ ಡೆಮಿಗಾಡ್ ತರ. ಅವನು ಕಾಮದೇವ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ಕಾಮದೇವ ಮನ್ಮಥ. ಸೊ ಅವನು he arouses passion in people. That is his function, passion. So Shiva ಒಂದ್ಸತಿ ಮೆಡಿಟೇಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಕೂತಿರ್ತಾನೆ. ಕೃಷ್ಣ ಬಾರೋಣ ಅಂದ್ರೆ
ಆ ಹಾಡಲ್ಲಿ ಐ ಥಿಂಕ್ ಮನ್ಮಥ ಜನಕನೇ ಬೇಗನೆ ಬಾರೋ ಕಮಲ ಸಖಿನಿ.
ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ಸಂಗೀತ ಕೇಳಿರಲ್ಲ ಬಿಡು. Don't worry about it. So I'm just putting you in a very simple story. ಶಿವ ಏನಾಗತ್ತೆ, ಸತಿ ಸ್ಟೋರಿ ಕೇಳಿದಾರಲ್ವಾ? ಶಿವನಿಗೆ ಮೊದಲು ಸತಿ ಅಂತ ಹೆಂಡತಿ ಇರ್ತಾಳೆ. ಅದೆಲ್ಲ ಆಕ್ಚುಲಿ ಬಾಬುಜಿ ಕಂಪ್ಲೀಟ್ ಇದು 44 ವಿಸ್ಪರ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬರೀತಾರೆ ಸತಿ ಸ್ಟೋರಿ ಎಲ್ಲ ತಪ್ಪು ಅಂತ. ಬಟ್ ಯು ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಗೋ ಬೈ ವಿತ್ ದ ಕಾಮನ್ ಬಿಲೀಫ್ ದಟ್ ಪೀಪಲ್ ಹ್ಯಾವ್. ಶಿವನ ಮಾವ ಇರ್ತಾರಲ್ಲ, ಸತಿ ಅವರಪ್ಪ, he doesn't like ಶಿವ ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಶಿವ ಈಸ್ ಇನ್ ಕೈಲಾಸದಲ್ಲಿ ಇರ್ತಾನೆ, ಥಂಡಿ ಪ್ರದೇಶ, ಸ್ಮಶಾನವಾಸಿ. ಅವನು ಹೋಗಿ ನನ್ನ ಮಗಳನ್ನ ಕೊಡ್ಬೇಕಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಅವನು ಮಗಳು ಪ್ರೀತಿ ಮಾಡಿರ್ತಾನೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಕೊಡ್ತಾನೆ ಒಟ್ಟಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಶಿವನಿಗೆ. ಆದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ನು ಯಾವಾಗಲೂ ಅನ್ಹ್ಯಾಪಿನೆಸ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಅವನೇನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾನೆ, ಒಂದು ಯಜ್ಞ ಆರ್ಗನೈಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾನೆ. ಯಜ್ಞ ಆರ್ಗನೈಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ಮಗಳನ್ನ ಮತ್ತೆ ಶಿವನ್ನ ಕರೆಯಲ್ಲ, ಬೇರೆ ಎಲ್ಲರನ್ನು ಕರೀತಾರೆ. ಮಗಳಿಗೆ ಇದು ಅವಮಾನ ಮಾಡ್ದಂಗೆ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ಅಳಿಯನಿಗೆ ಅವಮಾನ ಮಾಡ್ದಂಗೆ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ಮಗಳು ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾಳೆ, ಅವ್ರ ಅಪ್ಪನ ಮನೆಗೆ ಅವರಪ್ಪ ಕರೀದೇ ಇದ್ರು ಕೂಡ ಬರ್ತಾರೆ. ನಾನು ಮಗಳಲ್ಲ, ನಾ ಬರ್ಬೋದು ಅಂತ ಅಪ್ಪನ ಮನೆಗೆ ಬರ್ತಾರೆ. ಆ, ಮಗಳು ಹೇಳ್ತಾಳೆ ನೀವು ಅಳಿಯನ್ನ ಕರಿಬೇಕಿತ್ತು ಅಂತ. ಆದ್ರೆ ಇವನು ಕೇಳಲ್ಲ, ಅಳಿಯನ್ ಕಳಿಯಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಮಗಳಿಗೆ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಅವಮಾನ ಮಾಡ್ಬಿಡ್ತಾನೆ, ಬೈದು. ನಿನ್ನ ಯಾರು ಕರೆದು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಬರ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ, ನೀನು ಬರಬಾರ್ದಿತ್ತು ಅಂತ. ಸೊ ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಮುಂದೆ ಅವಮಾನ ಆದಾಗ ಶಿ ಗೆಟ್ಸ್ ಹ್ಯುಮಿಲೇಟೆಡ್. ಸೊ ಶಿ ಜಂಪ್ಸ್ ಇನ್ ಟು ದ ಸ್ಯಾಕ್ರಿಫೈಷಲ್ ಫೈರ್. ಸತಿ ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾಳೆ, ಆ ಬೆಂಕಿ ಇರುತ್ತಲ್ವಾ, ಹೋಮ ಹವನದ ಬೆಂಕಿ ಇರುತ್ತಲ್ಲ, ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಬಿಟ್ಟು ತನ್ನ ದೇಹ ತ್ಯಾಗ ಮಾಡ್ಬಿಡ್ತಾಳೆ. ಆಗ ಶಿವನಿಗೆ ಈ ವಿಷಯ ಮುಟ್ಟತ್ತೆ. ಶಿವ ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾನೆ, ತನ್ನ ಕೂದಲನ್ನು ತೆಗೆದು ಅವನು ವೀರಭದ್ರನ ಸೃಷ್ಟಿ ಮಾಡ್ತಾನೆ. ವೀರಭದ್ರನಿಗೆ ಇನ್ಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಷನ್ ಕೊಡ್ತಾನೆ, ಇವ್ರೇನು ಯಜ್ಞ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ರೆ ಹೋಗಿ ಎಲ್ಲ ಧ್ವಂಸ ಮಾಡು ಅಂತ. Veerabhadra comes to that particular place, he just creates havoc and he does not allow the yagna to be performed. So the yagna just stops there. And then Veerabhadra also kills Shiva's Mava, father-in-law. ಆಯ್ತು. ಬಟ್ ಬಂದು ಆಮೇಲೆ ಶಿವನ ಅತ್ತೆ ಇದಾರಲ್ಲ, ಅವ್ರು ಬಂದು ಮತ್ತೆ ಕೇಳ್ಕೊಳ್ತಾರೆ, ನನ್ನ ಗಂಡನ ಪ್ರಾಣ ಉಳಿಸ್ಕೊಡು ಅಂತ. ಶಿವಾಗ ಅವನೇನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾನೆ, ವೀರಭದ್ರನಿಗೆ ಹೇಳ್ತಾನೆ, ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಮೇಕೆ ತಲೆ ಈ ದಿಕ್ಕಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಇದು, ಹೋಗಿ ತಗೊಂಬಾರಯ್ಯ ಅಂತ. ಅವನು ಯಾವ ಪ್ರಾಣಿದ ಆ ದಿಕ್ಕಿನಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಬರೀ ಮೇಕೆ ತಲೆ ಮಾತ್ರ ಆ ದಿಕ್ಕಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ಹೋಗಿ ಮೇಕೆ ತಲೆ ಕಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಬರ್ತಾನೆ. ಸೊ ಅವನೇನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾನೆ, ಈ ದಕ್ಷ ಪ್ರಜಾಪತಿ, ಅವನ ಹೆಸರು, ಮಾವನ ಹೆಸರು ದಕ್ಷ ಪ್ರಜಾಪತಿ, ಅವನಿಗೆ ಈ ಮೇಕೆ ತಲೆ ಇಡ್ತಾನೆ. ಇದು ನೀವು ಮಧ್ಯಪ್ರದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ಹೋದ್ರೆ ಆ ದಕ್ಷ ಪ್ರಜಾಪತಿಗೆ ಒಂದು ವೀರಭದ್ರದ್ದು ಒಂದು ಟೆಂಪಲ್ ಇದೆ, ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ದಕ್ಷ ಪ್ರಜಾಪತಿದು ಒಂದು ದೇವಸ್ಥಾನ ಇದೆ. ಇದು ಕತೆ. ಸತಿ ಆ ರೀತಿ ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಡ್ತಾಳಲ್ವಾ, ಸತಿ ಆಗಿ ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಾಗ ಶಿವ ಆ ಸತಿನ ಎತ್ಕೊಂಡು ಎಲ್ಲ ಕಡೆ ದುಃಖ ಪಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ತಿರುಗ್ತಾ ಇರ್ತೇನೆ, ಅವನ ಹೆಂಡತಿ ಹೆಣ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡು. ಯಾರು ಏನ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು ಅವನ ದುಃಖದಿಂದ ಹೊರಗಡೆ ತರ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಆಗಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ಕಡೆಗೆ ಎಲ್ರು ಬಂದು ನಾರಾಯಣನ್ ಕೇಳ್ಕೊಳ್ತಾರೆ, ಏನಾರು ಮಾಡಪ್ಪ, ಇವನ್ನ ಹೊರಗಡೆನೆ ಬರ್ತಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ. ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಶಿವ ಇಸ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಫಂಕ್ಷನರಿ ಆಫ್ ನೇಚರ್. ಇಫ್ ಹಿ ಸ್ಟಾಪ್ಸ್ ಫಂಕ್ಷನಿಂಗ್, then it's trouble in nature. Everybody else is affected by him. ಆಫೀಸಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾರು ಸಡನ್ ಆಗಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಲಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರ ಕೆಲಸ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬೇರೆಯವ್ರಿಗೆಲ್ಲ ಹೋಗುತ್ತಲ್ಲ, ಎಷ್ಟು ದಿವಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ, ಅವನ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಪ್ಪ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಲ್ವಾ, ಆ ಥರ. ಆವಾಗ ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾನೆ ನಾರಾಯಣ, ಹಿ ಯೂಸಸ್ ಇಸ್ ಸುದರ್ಶನ ಚಕ್ರ ಟು ಕಟ್ ಸತೀಸ್ ಬಾಡಿ ಇಂಟು ಮಲ್ಟಿಪಲ್ ಪೀಸಸ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಇಟ್ ಫಾಲ್ಸ್ ಇನ್ ಡಿಫರೆಂಟ್ ಪಾರ್ಟ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಇಂಡಿಯಾ. And where these Sati's body parts fall, they are called as Shakti Pata, Shakti Kendra anta kariತೀವಿ. There are 108 Shakti Kendras like that, because it fell into 108 parts in different parts of India. So we have visited quite a few across India. So Shakti ಸ್ಥಳ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ ಅದನ್ನು. ಸರಿ, ಯಾವಾಗ ಹೆಂಡತಿದ್ದು ದೇಹನೂ ಹೊರಟೋಯ್ತಲ್ವಾ, ಶಿವನಿಗೆ ಮತ್ತಷ್ಟು ಬೇಜಾರಾಗೋಗುತ್ತೆ, ಹೋಗಿ ಮೆಡಿಟೇಷನ್ ಕೂತ್ಕೊಂಡ್ಬಿಡ್ತಾನೆ. ಅವನು ಮೆಡಿಟೇಷನ್ ಕೂತ್ಕೊಂಡು ಇನ್ನೇನು ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಆಗೋದೇ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಫಾರ್ ಏಜಸ್ he will be sitting in meditation and nobody is able to wake him up. ಈಗ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಟೈಮ್ ಪಾಸ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಭೂಮಂಡಲದಲ್ಲಿ. ದ ಸೇಮ್ ಸತಿ is now takes the Sati's soul takes the life of a Parvati, ಹಿಮವಂತನ ಮಗಳಾಗಿ. So she remembers Shiva and she is attracted to Shiva and she starts loving him. And then she demands, she starts worshipping Shiva with the wish that she wants to marry him. ಸರಿ, ಇವನು ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ತಪಸ್ಸಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂತಿದ್ದಾನೆ, ಇವಳು ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಅವನ ಮದುವೆ ಆಗ್ತೀನಿ ಅಂತ ಕೂತಿದ್ದಾಳೆ. ಹೇಗೆ ಮಾಡೋದು? ದೇವತೆಗಳೆಲ್ಲ ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಪಾರ್ವತಿ ಮದುವೆ ಆಗಿ ಅವರಿಗೆ ಷಣ್ಮುಖ ಹುಟ್ಟೋವರೆಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಇನ್ನೊಬ್ಬ ರಾಕ್ಷಸನ ಸಂಹಾರ ಆಗಲ್ಲ. ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ಸೀಕ್ವೆನ್ಸು. ಇವನು ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಮದುವೆ ಆಗಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಕೂತಿದ್ದೇನೆ, ವೈರಾಗಿಯಾಗಿ ಬ್ರಹ್ಮಚಾರಿಯಾಗಿ ತಪಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ. ಏನ್ ಮಾಡೋದು ಅಂತ ಎಲ್ಲ ಯೋಚನೆಗಳು ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ಎವ್ರಿ ಒನ್ ದೆನ್ ಪರ್ಸ್ಯೂಡ್ಸ್ ಕಾಮದೇವ, ನೀನು ಹೋಗಿ ನಿಂತ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಪ್ಪ, ನೀನು ಹೋಗಿ ಅವ್ನ ಮುಂದೆ ನಿಂತ್ಕೊಳ್ತು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಅವನ್ನ ಎಬ್ಬಿಸ್ಬೋದು ನೀನು. ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಡಿಸ್ಟರ್ಬ್ ಇನ್ ಮೆಡಿಟೇಷನ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಬ್ರಿಂಗ್ ಹಿಮ್ ಇನ್ ಟು ಪ್ಯಾಷನ್ so that will arouse him to get married to Parvati. ಪ್ಯಾಷನ್ ಇಲ್ಲದೆ ಇದ್ರೆ, ವೈರಾಗಿ ಆಗಿದ್ರೆ ಮದುವೆ ಇಲ್ಲ ಆಗ್ತಾನೆ ಅವನು. ಸೊ ಕಾಮದೇವ ನಾನು ಮಾಡಲ್ಲ ಅಂತಂದ್ರು ಕೂಡ ನಿನ್ ಬಿಟ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಗತಿ ಇಲ್ಲ, ನೀನೇ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ ಎಲ್ಲರೂ, ಎಲ್ಲ ದೇವತೆಗಳು ಕಳಿಸ್ತಾರೆ ಅವ್ನ ಮುಂದೆ. ಕಾಮದೇವ ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾನೆ, ಅವನಿಗೊಂದು ಸಾಂಕೇತಿಕವಾಗಿ ತೋರಿಸಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಬೇಸಿಕ್ಲಿ ಹಿ ಅರೌಸಸ್ ದ ಥಾಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಪ್ಯಾಷನ್ ಇನ್ ಶಿವ. ಬಟ್ ಸಾಂಕೇತಿಕವಾಗಿ ಡಿಪಿಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡೋದು ಹೆಂಗೆ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, ತೋರಿಸೋದು ಅವನು ಮನ್ಮಥನ ಬಾಣ ಹೊಡಿತಾನೆ ಅಂತ. ಮನ್ಮಥನ ಬಾಣ ಹೊಡೆದ್ರೆ ಆ ಥಾಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಪ್ಯಾಷನ್ ಅರೌಸ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ. ದಟ್ಸ್ ಹೌ ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಶೋನ್. But essentially, he is like an internal force. He arouses the sense of passion. Shiva gets enriched. ನಾ ಮೆಡಿಟೇಷನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಿರ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ನೀನು ನನಗೆ ಈ ಪ್ಯಾಷನ್ನ ಬಾಣ ಹೊಡೆದು ನಂಗೆ ಡಿಸ್ಟರ್ಬ್ ಮಾಡಿದೆ ಅಂತ 3ನೇ ಕಣ್ಣು ತೆಗಿತಾನೆ, ಸುಟ್ಟು ಹೋಗ್ತಾನೆ ಮನ್ಮಥ. ಸುಟ್ಟು ಹೋದ್ಮೇಲೆ ದೇವತೆಗಳೆಲ್ಲ ಬಂದು ಮನ್ಮಥನ ಕೆಲಸ ಇದೆ, ನೀನು ಅವನ್ನ ಸುಟ್ಟು ಹಾಕ್ಬಿಟ್ರೆ ಅವನ ಕೆಲಸ ಯಾರು ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಅಂತ ಮತ್ತೆ ಶಿವನ್ ಕೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. ನೋಡಿ, ಶಿವನಿಗೂ ಕಂಟ್ರೋಲ್ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅವನ ಆಂಗರ್ ಮೇಲೆ. ಧ್ಯಾನ ಮಾಡ್ತಿರ್ತಾನೆ, ಧ್ಯಾನ ಮಾಡಿದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಯಾರೋ ಬಂದು ಎಪ್ಸಿದ್ರೆ ಅವರಿಗೆ ಈ ತರ ಸುಟ್ಟಾಕ್ಬಿಡಿದೆ. ದೇವತೆಗಳೆಲ್ಲ ಬಂದು ಯಾಕೆ ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ಆಯ್ತು ಅಂತ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪ್ಲೇನ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಶಿವ ಮತ್ತೆ ಕೋಪ ಶಮನ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಂಡು ದೇವತೆಗಳು ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ, ನೋಡಪ್ಪ ನಿನ್ಗೆ ಮದುವೆ ಆಗ್ಬೇಕು, ನಿನ್ಗೆ ಮದುವೆ ಆದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಪಾರ್ವತಿ ಜೊತೆಗೆ, ಪಾರ್ವತಿ ಕಾಯ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾಳೆ ನಿನ್ ಮದುವೆ ಆಗ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ, ಆಮೇಲೆ ನಿನ್ಗೆ ಷಣ್ಮುಖ ಹುಟ್ಟಬೇಕು, ಅವ್ನು ಹುಟ್ಟಾದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಅವನು ಹೋಗಿ ಆ ರಾಕ್ಷಸನ ಸಂಹಾರ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು, ಇಷ್ಟೆಲ್ಲ ಕೆಲಸ ಇದೆ. ನೀನ್ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಕಾಮದೇವನಿಗೆ ಸುಟ್ಟಾಕ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿಲ್ಲ, ಅವನ ಕೆಲಸ ಯಾರು ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದಾಗ ಮತ್ತೆ ಶಿವಂದು ತಪಸ್ಸು ಇದು ಶಾಂತವಾಗಿ ಅವನ ತಪಶಕ್ತಿಯಿಂದ ಮತ್ತೆ ಮನ್ಮಥನಿಗೆ ಜೀವ ಕೊಡ್ತಾನೆ. ಇದು ಮನ್ಮಥನ ಕತೆ. ಮನ್ಮಥ is active in all of us as the god who evokes a sense of passion in us. He is the god of passion. ಸರಿನಾ? ಈಗ ನಾವು ಕೇಳ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ. So I am a bit surprised that some people have not heard about Manmatha. He is very potent. In fact, if Manmatha is not functioning, the entire the cycle of creation stops. Just imagine, if Manmatha is not active in any one of us, neither we feel inclined to have any sexual thoughts, nor will have any relationship, nor will have any marriage or childhood, nothing of that kind. So the entire cycle of creation will stop if this fellow doesn't act. So his is a very crucial role. To maintain the creation, he has to work hard. Anyway, the sages have classified the disciples under 2 main heads, the Manumata and Gurumata. The former, the Manumata, are those people who approach the Guru with some particular worldly end in view, such as relief from worldly misery, desire for wealth, etc. They submit to him only so long as they are hopeful in the achievement of their desires. When they meet disappointment in this respect, they are off. For such disciples, the question of obedience or submission does not even arise. What to talk about surrender? So before we enter into the state of surrender, there are 2 other states that we get. First, we develop obedience, then we submit to the master to enter into a state of submission, then we develop faith, and then in the end we develop surrender. So these 4 things have to come before we reach the 4th stage of surrender. First we get obedience, then submission, then faith, and then surrender. Now all of these things feed into one another. Without this obedience, there is no question of any submission. Without submission, there is no obedience. Right? Likewise, without obedience, there is no faith. Without faith, there is no submission. Likewise, without submission, there is no surrender. Without faith also, there is no surrender. So they all kind of interact on one another. It's very difficult to say which one clear-cutly comes in for which level, and then after which what something else comes. So there's no rigid boundary between them. They flow on one another. Okay. Guru Mata disciples are those who obey the commands of the master in all matters and try to submit to his will in all possible ways. Submission begins with obedience. When we are deeply impressed by the great powers of the master of higher attainments in spirituality, we feel inwardly inclined to follow his biddings. But often the effect remains upon us only when we are in his presence, and when we are away from him, we become unmindful of him. Repeated association with him for some time brings us in closer touch with the great soul, and his supremacy begins established in our heart. We accept him as our guide in all matters pertaining to our spiritual attainment. This is why I said that until unless we come to the 4th point, our faith in the master will not grow strong. By the time we come to the 4th point, we would have had some experience in spirituality. We would have seen some changes in our life. All those things impress upon us. Yes, this is the person who can actually lead us in our spiritual pursuit. We accept him as our guide in all matters pertaining to our spiritual advancement. The result is that we remember him frequently. When we are perfectly convinced of his superior qualities or capabilities, only then our submission in the true sense begins. We start with obedience and then gradually move to submission. We go on with it and practice as we are directed. We think of pleasing him by our actions. The idea of right or wrong too begins to assume prominence in our heart and we feel inclined to refrain from evil. We consequently adopt the line of virtue so that we might be able to please our great master. It is our primary motive, for we wish to be saved from the miseries of the next life. But so far we reserve ourselves the right of discretion and are therefore responsible for all our actions, whether we are good or bad. At a higher stage of self-surrender, such a discretionary power becomes almost extinct, and a man does everything thinking it to be his master's will. The question of right or wrong does not arise at all in his mind, and it becomes absolutely certain that by following his master's will, he is doing the only right choice or the right thing, and he does nothing but the right feeling. That's the right, feeling it to be his master's will. So this is about self-surrender. Then you have a very big chapter on realization. Then after that, my vision. So what we can do is we can actually finish the my vision and then come to the realization. Now, many of these things that we read, as I said, will also get repeated in the Sahajmar philosophy. So if you want to simultaneously read the reality at dawn and Sahajmar philosophy, you will see that lot of things are repeated. So you will actually kind of finish the second book also simultaneously. Okay. Any questions before we move to the next chapter? So obedience, submission, then faith before or after submission, and then surrender. But the thing is, for that, we have to practice with awareness. You remember the peace? Practice to experience with awareness and sensitivity. The peace. Peas. Remember that. Practice to experience with awareness and sensitivity. That is what helps you to develop all these three things: obedience, submission, and surrender. Okay? ಸರಿ, ಏನೋ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಇದೆಯಾ? 10 ಕಾಲ ಆಯ್ತು ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿ. ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ನಿದ್ದೆ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ? ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ನಿದ್ದೆ ಬರ್ತಿದೆ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸಲ್ಲಿ ಕಂಟಿನ್ಯೂ ಮಾಡೋಣ, ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಇಟ್ಸ್ ಪ್ರಿಟಿ ಲೇಟ್ ಆಕ್ಚುಲಿ. ಐ ಆಮ್ ಓಕೆ ಫಾರ್ ಯು ಟು ಕಂಟಿನ್ಯೂ ವಿತ್ ದ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್, ವಿಚ್ ಇನ್ ಕೇಸ್ ವಿಲ್ ಕಂಟಿನ್ಯೂ ವಿತ್ ರಿಯಲೈಸೇಷನ್ ಆಸ್ ವಿ ಆರ್ ಇನ್ ರಿಯಲೈಸೇಷನ್ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ. ಅದೇ ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್ನ ಕಂಟಿನ್ಯೂ ಮಾಡೋಣ, ಸರಿನಾ? ಹಾಗೆ ಮಾಡೋಣ. ಎಲ್ರದ್ದು ಓಕೆನಾ? ಓಕೆ ಏನು ಹೇಳ ಸರ್, ಆಲ್ರೆಡಿ ನಿದ್ದೆನೇ ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಡ್ತೀವಿ.